it's gonna be about Midnight Club 2. This is one of the earliest racing games like I ever played. Right? One of the earliest racing game experiences, right? So yeah, Midnight Club 2, I remember I could play this like a lot growing up. Midnight Club 2, so I remember playing it, like you had to be perfect in every race. Every race like you do, you gotta be perfect. So you gotta finish in first place in order to, progress. And yeah, it got very fast paced because like you always had that sense of urgency, so you had to get like in first place, outdo all the other racers, and yeah. Now you also went to different cities, right? Los Angeles, right? Not so yeah, LA, Paris, Tokyo, and yeah. Each city like was structured differently in the structure like of the roads, the highways, how you had to turn, and yeah. Now, like with Midnight Club 2, I can remember like it had a very unique tone, a personality to it. In the soundtracks, the animated cutscenes, the racing. I remember like the animated cutscenes. So like every person. So basically like you would like challenge somebody, right? You'd have to challenge somebody, and then there's this animated cutscene like of somebody talking to you, talking a crap to you, like so, that type of competitive energy, and yeah. It was kind of weird because you as your character, you had no response, you had no voice. You're just there watching like the slander, right? From the other person. Some characters, so some anime characters were more welcoming. Some had a different, they had a different charm to them, or some sort of beef, or some sort of a chip in their shoulder, and yeah. So Midnight Club 2, I can remember that like a lot, like with every, like with different different competitive racers that you faced, right? From I can remember one being Dice, right? Dice, right? That was the main event guy in LA, and yeah. As you went to further cities, so like further cities like Paris, Tokyo, the animated cutscenes that gave the game that extra sense of that extra personality, right? And yeah, Midnight Club 2, as you progress further like into races, so you would start off like with very slow cars, and eventually make your way up like to the more faster cars. For the most part though, like the cars they differ like in speed. So the further on you got, the more faster cars got. Like as with any racing games, right? And yeah, there's also things like handling. So certain cars had better handling to them, right? Or a weight transfer, right? And yeah. But basically, as you defeat, so there's different challengers, right? So it's different these animated challengers, right? In these animated cutscenes, as you defeated certain challengers, you would get their vehicle, right? So in like the series of races, once you completed each race, finish it like in first place, you would be able to qualify and get their, how do you call it again? Get their vehicle, and yeah. So that was mostly like like in terms of the progression system, and that was what it was about, right? Trying to maximize your potential and get first place each time, and then eventually get a better cars, and then the better cars, and then the better cars, right? And yeah. Now, as you got like from LA, so LA, because you start off in LA, it is the easiest part like of the game, right? It is very easy, right? And you get like in that first place. As you got to Paris, it got harder. Paris is probably like the hardest map to race on because the roads are more narrow, the highways are different, right? And there's, well, LA has more traffic, but still, like it's just the roads are more narrow. It is harder to turn like in Paris, and yeah, and you got more stuff in the way, like more barricades in the way, and yeah. Tokyo like was more wide open, like LA. So Tokyo was more wide open, but the city area was different, obviously different like than LA, and yeah. And each city that you went into, you had to adjust how you drove like in that city, right? And yeah, you got to be very cautious. But as you got further into each city, you get very familiar like with the map structure, right, and the track areas, and yeah. I remember the game Midnight Club 2, right? So you had one of the main differences, like in terms of progression. You started off like at one nitro, a capacity. So a one nitro, right? That was a level 1, and then eventually got 2, 3, 4, and then eventually 5. So like with more a nitro boost, right? And the more a nitro boost you had, the more able like you were to speed through areas, and yeah. There's also ramps, so ramps as well, like in terms of the structure like of the map, the ramps, right? So certain maps. I remember Paris had like this huge ramp that would give you this aerial advantage, so you would use it, and yeah, you give you shortcuts too, and shortcuts too as well. So shortcuts going off road into certain alleyways or something like that, and or certain highways already that would give you a certain advantage, and yeah. Now, the checkpoint system in the game. The checkpoint system, this is what made the races very interesting in that the checkpoint system, you had to hit every checkpoint. So every single checkpoint in the game you had to hit. So those blue, kind of like a blue aura, like this huge blue light, like in the city, you got to hit each of them to get, to eventually get to the finish line. The orange light, right? And yeah, so, you have to be very careful because if you miss a checkpoint, you'd have to go back or it's gonna really throw you off, right? Because you gotta hit the checkpoint, right? Certain checkpoints, so certain races, for the most part, it's like a regular race, so you hit them like in order. So each checkpoint like is in order. Other races are more difficult in that these are more rare, right? In that they're out of order, so they're out of order, so you gotta hit them like in random order, right? And but certain orders like are easier, right? In that 4 checkpoints are spread across the city, and depending like on how familiar like you were with each map, it would get easier. But there are certain orders that are easier, right? So certain orders of collecting checkpoints that were easier. So checkpoint systems, right? I remember like it gave the game a very unique visual style, right? And yeah, I love that bright blue light. Just it is very obvious. Like where the checkpoint is, and yeah. There's also like in terms of this game, Midnight Club 2, there is no laps. So there was no laps as far as I remember. It was just all one lap races, right? So you have to be perfect like in that one lap, and yeah. So more in it too, like the soundtrack. I remember the soundtrack. Oh, like the soundtrack. That's what really got me into the game, right? But soundtrack. So these are more like disco-based music. I believe there was some jazz. There's like hip hop, right, as well. There's like Japanese-inspired instrumentals, and yeah. But I really like the music. The soundtrack was amazing in this game, right? It's one of the it's probably a top 5 like in terms of video game soundtracks for me, right? Right, and yeah. Other racing games like Need for Speed back in the early 2000s, right, had a different type of music, right? Other types of racing games will have more heavy metal or rock and roll style music to it. But I really like what I did here. Like with the disco music really goes well with the tone of the game, right? And yeah. Other things too, like you had extra arcade modes. Midnight Club 2, you had arcade modes. So for example, arcade modes, they would actually make it, there's like power-ups. So they basically power-up. So power-ups, for example, you can manipulate how other people drive. But so let's say if you a tailgate, behind somebody, and if you pick up the stop power-up, so the stop power-up, right, which basically makes your opponent stop, right? So the opponent stops in place. So if you tailgate, behind somebody, and if you activate the power-up, the opponent is gonna stop, right? There's other ones too as well, invisibility. So if you literally drive through any vehicle or any a barricade structure, and yeah, there's other ones too. For example, there's blast. There's like pulse. So the pulse, I believe, it create this blast, and you throw racers around you off, right? And yeah. But the arcade modes, and you could replay every campaign race or every single player race. You could replay them with the with the power-ups on now, which is very fun. There's also extra nitro boost as well. So nitro boost, right? So they would just give you extra nitro, right? And yeah, but yeah, the power-ups are were very fun. There is also, so in terms of difficulty of the game, like I said before, it is a game where you gotta be perfect, So it is centered around a perfection. So once you get more familiar like with the races and the checkpoint system, right? Once you get more familiar like with those things, it gets very easy to get like in the first place. But again, the game is all about, with most racing games, it's all about speed. But this one in particular, as let's say, so each time you challenge somebody new, right? They're going to outdo you, like in terms of their vehicle, right? So for the most part, there are exceptions, right, where you're pretty much like in the same level, like as what the challenger has, like in his vehicle. But sometimes though, like they're gonna outdo you, like in terms of their nitro boost capacity, their speed, handling, and yeah. In terms of difficulty too, like the AI is very smart. The AI in this game is very, very, very smart, right? They're very good at finding the shortcuts, right? The easier checkpoint route sometimes, and you gotta really like, especially like for the harder races where you gotta do it like many, many, many times to get to the first place, right? And yeah, but difficulty wise, if you like racing games, right? It might be slightly more difficult, for you. It gets easier. It's very easy, like in the beginning, but then it gets harder once you get to Paris, and yeah. So customization too as well. There wasn't a lot of vehicle customization. It was just color customization, so changing the color of the vehicle. That came in. So the customization came in later with Midnight Club 3 and Midnight Club Dub Edition, Dub Edition Remix, right? And Midnight Club 4, as those added in like bumper customization, hood customization as well, tinting customization, neon light customization, and yeah. But this one, for the most part, there wasn't. And customization, I was just color, so you could just change the color like of the vehicle, and yeah. And that's where the game was kind of lacking. But I understand it is an older. Like, again, this is like a very old PS2 game, and yeah. Speaking of old, so visually too as well, I think in terms of visuals, it is one of the best looking PS2 games. Like for cars, like for just vehicles alone, like for vehicles, it looks very, and the city, the areas, the map, looks very visually nice, like for that time, and yeah. You look at certain racing games where the cars will look very old. Sorry, the style of the cars I would look very weird, and the graphics I wouldn't be very good. But graphically and visually here, they really did a good job, right? And yeah, I don't know. So it was made by Rockstar. I don't know if Rockstar is ever gonna go back to it. I don't know. The last one we had, Midnight Club 4, was probably 2010, 09. It was 14 years ago. Sorry, 15 years ago. 15 years ago. So it's been that long since the last Midnight Club game. And with Midnight Club 2 is a game like I really want to see come back. We see Need for Speed. The Need for Speed game like every other year. So every 2 years I did a new Need for Speed game, right? And yeah, but I remember the early days of Need for Speed, Midnight Club, other things like Burnout and Flat Out, and yeah. But Midnight Club 2, right? If you like racing games, right, I recommend it. Like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.